Greetings, folks. Uh, I know I've realised something. I normally say good evening or something like that, but it's not evening to a lot of you because you're elsewhere. So I'll just say greetings from now on. Thanks for joining me again. This is my 8th live reading. The previous 7 are up on my author page, my Facebook author page, which is facebook.com/go to the machine. Tonight's story is taken from the March issue. I don't know if you can see that because it's quite glossy and the glare on it's a bit bad. But the March issue of Horror Magazine from Breaking Rules Publishing. Now, I've worked with Breaking Rules a couple of times now. They're a great bunch of people, but more on that later. Um, for now, I'll just tell you that to get hold of a copy of this magazine, um, there is a link under the video. It's like mybook.to, and then a bunch of letters and numbers. It was one of the first links I made, so I made it overly complicated. um, the reason I'm waffling at the minute is because it was pointed out to me last time by Chris that sometimes the video doesn't sync properly to begin with. It takes a while for it to get going, but I think I've given it enough whirl this time. Right, so tonight's story is Guided by the Light, and it starts with a quote from the preacher and pastor A.W. Tozer. When you kill time, remember that it has no resurrection. The 125cc engine roared and sputtered as Jenny took the sharp bend towards the wallows. A shower of slick, wet mud was sent up into the air, coating her visor. There wasn't much time left. The short window of opportunity would be slammed shut at any minute. She pulled hard on the throttle, gunning the engine and spinning the wheel on the slippery surface. It had been months since she first spotted the strange light beaming down from the sky. At first, she thought it was just a one-off freak occurrence, but once she realised that it happened at the same time, every day, and shone down at the same angle, she sensed that it was something more. Like the treasure seeker chasing the gold at the end of the rainbow, Jenny had become obsessed. The strange purplish light jutted down in a diagonal trajectory from somewhere in the heavens. It seemed to strike a specific point of land just out past the area of swampland known as the Wallows. It had taken her an eternity to narrow it down to an area feasible to scour. Jenny's cousin was an avid hiker and general outdoorsman, so she borrowed his Ordnance Survey maps and other orientation devices and perched herself on the rocks high in the Cornish hills just north of Bettles Cove. There she sat, day after day, with a pair of binoculars and the map at the ready, trying to narrow down the position at which the beams struck the earth. The trouble was, the beam only shone for precisely 6 minutes and could only be seen through a lens. Jenny had modified her motorcycle helmet accordingly by gluing the lens of an old camera in the top left-hand portion of the visor. This way, as long as she kept to the right of the beam, she could follow it for a short distance. Her work on the map had narrowed down the location of the beam's end to just over a mile of swampland and woodland. Once the search area had been set, then it had boiled down to a process of trial and error. A long process of trial and error. She had identified several start points and had divided the area into squares that she had diligently ticked off as she went. Now there was only a small patch near the centre of the map left to cover. She was close. The first time Jenny had encountered the strange light, she had been out taking some photographs when she spotted it. As a student of art and a budding artist herself, she often went walking in the wild countryside in search of dramatic landscapes for inspiration. That one day the clouds were dark and brooding over the historic fishing town where she lived, and she stopped to take a few snaps. In the viewfinder, she could see the odd purple streak. It was straight as an arrow and relatively thin. At first, she thought it was some kind of distortion caused by a trick of the light or some other atmospheric effect. When she viewed the pictures on her laptop later that day, that explanation seemed less sound. Upon viewing the HD images, it looked to Jenny as though the beam was solid. There was no diffusion around the edges, and nothing could be seen through the beam. There was also no variation in the strength of the light, unlike rainbows that fade out the closer it got to land. The following day, she took the images around to her brother to see what he could make of them. Jenny and Paul couldn't have been more different. Despite being twins, yes, they shared the sandy hair and green eyes characteristic of the Prince family, but where Paul was short and tubby, his sister was tall and athletic. Paul always took keen pleasure in berating his sister for wasting her time and opportunities, where he did what he thought was sensible and took a college course in IT, followed by landing a high-flying job in advertising. He classified Jenny's pursuit of her artistic dreams to be pointless and unrealistic. So let's see what you've found to procrastinate over this time, Paul sneered. You will latch onto any bit of nonsense just to drag out your extended childhood, won't you? Just shut up and look at the pictures, will you? Jenny replied in a long-suffering tone. See what I mean? Paul sighed and turned his attention to the screen. Whoa, he explained, giving his glasses a buff on the arm of his long-sleeved superhero shirt. That is bizarre, all right. His fingers danced over the keyboard, and he zoomed the image in on the purple streak. And you say they are all the same? Yeah, no matter the angle of the picture or the atmospheric light, they are exactly the same hue and sharpness in every picture. Jenny had leaned in over her sibling's shoulder and was peering at the screen. Paul shrugged her off and tapped the keys again, bringing all the images on the screen. He laid them on top of each other and lined up the beam. The countryside melted into a muddy green and grey blur, but the purple beam got stronger and more defined. Paul muttered to himself as he ran a series of filters and enhancements over the issues. He tried every tool at his disposal to try and to break the image down, to prove that it was a trick of the light or some kind of distortion, but anything and everything he threw at the anomaly made it stronger and more tangible. A wall of frustration began to build up inside Paul. It was as though the beam of purple light was an affront to his technical prowess. Did you drop the camera? He asked sarcastically. No, Jenny barked. Just admit it. You have no more idea than I do. Jenny smiled at her brother's frustration. It was deeply satisfying for her to see him lost for words. He was always such a know-it-all. Okay, Paul huffed and held both of his hands up in surrender. I admit it. I have no idea what has caused your anomaly, but I can tell you one thing. He paused for dramatic effect. Jenny hated it when he did that. The beam is going up, not down. The following day, Jenny returned to the same spot, but at an earlier time. She pointed her digital camera at the sky fruitlessly for what seemed like an eternity. She was about to call it a day and head home, but just as she was taking her last shot, it appeared. The beam did indeed emanate from the ground and shot upwards. She saw the whole event from start to finish, and the time code on her camera calculated the length of the event at exactly 6 minutes. Once home, she called her brother. It was there again, at the same time and for exactly 6 minutes, she exclaimed. So, it's probably the military or something. That was Paul's sullen reply. In Bettles Cove? Jenny replied mockingly. What does it matter anyway? It's just the purple light, Jenny. It's not going to get you a job. Why do you always have to be such a dick? She retorted, anger burning in her voice. Well, why do you have to be such a loser? Just stop wasting your life and get a goddamn job. Paul bellowed down the phone, hurting her ears. Jenny screamed a string of obscenities in response and hung up. That was the last time she spoke to her brother. From that point on, the strange beam of light would become an obsession that would grow to be all consuming. Every day, without fail, she would hike up to her vantage point on the hill and take pictures, then gaze in wonder at its shimmering brilliance for the duration of its appearance. No matter what she was doing, she would drop everything and hasten to the hills at the same time every day. She missed lectures. She missed life studies and tutoring sessions. She even missed her mother's birthday meal just to see the light, though her brother's presence may also have had something to do with that. Jenny would stay up all night studying the pictures she had taken, to the point where she became tired and withdrawn. She had ruined several expensive canvases trying to recreate the vision in paint. She could never quite get the shade right. There was something unnatural about its hue and tone, something hypnotic and terrible. The dirt bike Jenny had bought with the last of her student loan handled the rugged bends and tracks with ease. She had bought the bike after first trying the car she borrowed off her cousin, and a bicycle, then deemed them both unfit for the task. She had a full driver's license for the car, so she could ride anything up to a 125, and quickly found a suitably cheap machine in the classifieds of the local paper. The beam was still in her vision as she passed into a small copse. Momentarily, she lost sight of her guiding light and cursed vehemently, steaming up her visor. The canopy quickly thinned out, and she skidded to a halt just in time to see the final glow of the beam disappear into a large mound. Jenny was ecstatic. She'd finally located the origin point of the purple light. Quickly removing her helmet and gloves, she ran to the point that she had last seen the light. Disappointment flooded her soul as she stared at the barren patch of soil in front of her. She could hear the mocking words of her brother echoing in her ears. It seemed that her quest had been a colossal waste of time, money, and effort after all. A mascara-caked tear rolled down her cheek, leaving a greasy black trail, and dripped onto the ground. The tear moistened the soil for mere seconds before evaporating. Jenny was struck by the strangeness of this event and dropped to her knees and ran her fingers in the earth. A metre square patch of earth was warm to the touch, though cooling rapidly, and was framed perfectly with hard granite, as though the square had been cut out somehow. Jenny scrabbled furiously at the loose earth until she uncovered a depressed square of stone that looked like it had been carved out of the hill, then replaced like a cork. Jenny jumped up and down on the rock, but it just wouldn't budge. Eventually, a little light went off overhead, and she knew what she must do. She must return tomorrow during the 6-minute window. That night, Jenny did some research online about the strange mound in the copse. Archaeologists had listed it as a Stone Age burial site, but some academics disagreed about that classification. The mound, known locally as Scavenger's Hump, was said to have had some strange electromagnetic properties and used to be a druidic place of power. The hump had fallen out of memory and had lain forgotten since the Middle Ages by everyone except for a handful of academics and occultists. Jenny was excited by her discovery, as nowhere in any of the articles had anybody mentioned either the purple light or the strange indented stone. Images of becoming a female Indiana Jones or a Cornish Lara Croft danced before her eyes, and she revelled in her dream of making a hugely important historical discovery and finally being able to tell Paul to stick it. She busied herself for the rest of the evening, preparing for what she might uncover. If the door, if that's what it was indeed turned out to be, did open, then she would need torches, rope, supplies of food, and water if she was going inside. following day passed so incredibly slowly that she nearly drove herself crazy, pacing and fretting. By the time afternoon came around, she had given up any pretense of getting any study done and zoomed off into the countryside. Once at the site, Jenny made herself comfortable amongst the trees and shrubs and sat in wait. The minutes ticked slowly on until the time was almost at hand. Anticipation burned in her body like a fever as the final countdown had begun. The world faded away like background noise as her eyes and mind focused on the square in the mound. Suddenly, the mound seemed to shiver almost, and the square began to glow with the purple light. The stone warped, distorted, and faded into nothing as the light burst forth and shot into the sky. This close, she could see the light with a naked eye, and she could also see beyond the light and into the hump. A thick blackness beckoned to her, called her, lured her forward, and before she knew what was happening, her feet had brought her to the threshold of the opening. The light grew in intensity and seared into her vision. Jenny screwed her eyes tightly and took a step forward. The ground seemed to fall away beneath her feet, and gravity yanked her forward sharply and swiftly. Jenny landed hard, face first on solid granite, driving the wind out of her body. Jenny gasped and wheezed to suck in the stale air before finally she passed out. Patterns and shapes danced before her eyes as Jenny Prince began to regain consciousness. She hadn't been out long, just a few minutes, but long enough for the hole in the mound to seal again. It took another few minutes before her vision cleared and she was able to make out her surroundings. She did not need the torches she had packed, as the chamber she found herself in was lit by clusters of fungi that exuded a purplish phosphorescence. The chamber was domed and hewn out of solid rock. There was no evidence of tool marks, so how it was carven was a complete mystery. The square entrance that she dropped in through was only around 6 feet up, so getting out shouldn't prove too difficult. But she had to wait 24 hours before it would open again. Jenny turned slowly around the dome and gazed at the walls. They appeared to be mottled with splotches of ink of some kind. Jenny moved in closer to the wall, and it became clear that what she was seeing was writing, layers and layers of writing over the top of each other until nothing was legible. A strange gust of subterranean wind drew her attention away from the smudges and daubs and to another square opening that she hadn't noticed moments before. The tunnel beyond was lit with the same glow as the chamber she now stood in, so she left a rucksack behind and crawled through the gap and down the tunnel into a larger dome below. The tunnel started on a smooth gradient that got steeper the further she descended. The stone, smoothed by centuries of moisture, got increasingly slippery as she went, and she slid the last few meters and landed in an undignified heap. Pulling herself to her feet and dusting herself off, she surveyed the room. The glowing fungi and lichens seemed to have been grown at specific points, dividing the chamber up with light like a giant pie chart. In the center of the room was a huge black monolith carved from a stone that she couldn't identify. Jenny began to walk towards the center, and her feet crashed into a pile of what she took to be a bundle of sticks before looking down and discovering, to her shock, that it was a pile of bones. Human bones. Jenny recoiled instinctively from the remains, and she cast her eyes around the rest of the room. The entire floor, as far as the eye could see, was littered with bones. The coverage was so thick that not a single patch of stone could be seen towards the centre. And what she had taken for an incline towards the monolith was in fact a hill of the dead. Jenny recalled the reports naming the site as a burial ground, but the set of bones nearest to her was not clad in the furs of Stone Age man, but was clad in robes of an altogether different epoch. As she slowly made her way around the circumference of the chamber, she saw that there were not just the clothing from one era, but from a whole jumble of different times. Her pulse started to quicken when she spotted what looked to be a Victorian explorer's outfit. People had indeed found their way into the mound much more recently than she had expected. A well of unease started to overflow within as a horrible thought planted its seed in her mind. What if the light had been a lure, a trap, a fat, juicy worm wriggling on a massive cosmic hook? Jenny checked her mobile phone. She had very little battery left, an oversight that she cursed herself for. It didn't matter because there was no signal whatsoever. She'd seen enough in this terrible chamber, and she decided to make her way back up to the antechamber, ready to make her exit. Panic gripped her heart as she scanned the wall behind her and could see no sign of the hole. She was sure she hadn't walked that far, and was also sure that she should have been still able to see the aperture. Jenny began to retrace her steps when she tripped over something thicker than mere bone. She landed with another thump. She was slowly becoming bruised all over and turned to look at her obstacle. There amongst the bones was a relatively fresh human cadaver. Jenny scrambled away from it in horror. Judging from the clothing, Jenny deduced that it couldn't be any more than a year old. The corpse had mummified as though its lifeblood had been sucked dry. Jenny, now petrified, started to run frantically around the room, searching for the exit. She ran and ran, round and round, until her legs buckled and she fell to her knees in despair. The time of the opening came and went. Her battery died, and she began to feel weak and delirious from lack of sustenance and rest. After 2 days of walking in circles, Jenny finally collapsed into a deep slumber. Something came to Jenny in her deep, dark dream. Something ancient and unnatural, unearthly and hungry. Something grateful. Jenny froze in terror as the strange creature approached. It looked like a marriage of insect and crustacean. Its 3 unblinking eyes burned with the familiar aura of purple glow, and its many appendages twitched and jerked greedily. Jenny could do nothing as the creature uncoiled the tentacles around its gaping, lamprey-like maw and clamped himself to her abdomen and began to feast. The creature thanked her for her offering of life wasted and her feast of wasted time. Like those who had fallen into the pit of Jerigathy before, she had squandered her existence and was perfect fodder for the scavenger. As the parasite god satiated itself on her life force, sucking and gnawing her very life and will to live, she never awoke from the nightmare, and no trace of Jenny Prince was ever found. The end. Thank you. Yeah, that was Guided by the Light from the Breaking Rules Publishing horror magazine, the March 2020 issue. Like I said before the video, there's a universal link underneath the video, this here video. If you click on that, it'll take you to the Amazon nearest to you, to your country's Amazon. Okay. Also, like I say, it's a magazine. It's quite a regular publication. Check out. They have some Breaking Rules. I like working with them. They're cool people. I mean, Christopher Rule is a good guy, and Patty is a great editor. And plus, she seems to like my stuff, which is always a bonus. Uh, but some also they've got some really good writers on their books, like Tricia McKee, Jennifer Gordon, R.C. Mulhare, Ed Green, some really good people. And also, like I say, this obviously a lot of what I write is cosmic horror. But if you're also a fan of the sort of cosmic and the Lovecraftian, also in this is a story by R.C. Mulhare, which is yeah, a Lovecraftian tale, and it's well worth picking up to check it out because it's a bit of a fan of that story. It's a good one. Like I say, you can't really see very well, but there you go. What I'll do is I'll post the picture of the actual magazine up on the thing. Now, I'm hoping you've had some questions down. If not, get them down now. I will do the Q&A in a minute. I'll just tell you about a little bit of the process of the writing that, which is kind of, this kind of what I do on this. This was a story that I didn't write for anything specific. Quite often I'll see a submission call and think, oh, I've got an idea for that. Or, oh, I could have an idea for that. This actually came from a dream. I know it sounds pretentious, but I do actually get a lot of ideas from my dreams to the point where I have several notebooks on my bedside table and a pencil and a pen. Uh, and many of the times I've woken up my significant other by scribbling in the dark. Um, but yeah, this one was a dream. Um, yeah, I can't really remember the details of it, but I know I wrote it down in the morning, and it's pretty much as it came. Obviously, the characters weren't, but yeah. So it came about by that, and I just saw that for the horror magazine. I thought, give it a whirl, and they liked it. So, and then I've had a couple of other things published with Breaking Rules since then in the Hollow series of anthologies. Um, I'm in volume 1 and volume 2, but you can't. Gosh, that's there was a problem with the publication on that one. So volume 2 became volume 4. So I'm in 1 and 4 of the Hollows. Funnily enough, the story in volume 1 is the story that was my very first live reading. So it's in the videos bit if you want to watch it. Model Citizen, me throwing myself in the deep end. Every story I've done since then has been about 2,000 words shorter. And I've done it using a tablet because I mean you can see how I have this set up. It's pretty dark. It's pretty dark out here, and there's me trying to read from a book. Funnily enough, this isn't the first time I've read this. I did this story as a test run, but I recorded it, and it's never seen light of day because I mean, I like as a lot of you probably know from these videos, I suffer very badly from hay fever. And it was just when all the grass pollen, all the grass had been cut round here, and I had a massive sort of like sneezing stroke coughing fit in the middle of it. Basically, my head exploded. It wasn't nice. So I'm quite glad. So, yeah. And I was reading off the magazine, which isn't ideal because again, trying to see that in the dark, it's yeah. I would actually save a lot of the author because now I get a lot of friends or author friends like joining me on these. You might want to check this out because it's not just sort of stories. I mean, the short stories poetry, but there's also like there's really good tips. There's some really good marketing tips and blog tips, and they're a very helpful bunch of people. Breaking Rules, very helpful people. Um, so yeah, and I mean, yeah, I do. Any budding author, I urge you to check them out because they got some really good talent there, and really nice people. Okay, so that's enough waffling about that. Let's get on to the questions. Speaking of Chris, Mr. Rule, yeah, thank you, Chris. Yep, and Patty. That's it. Patty is the editor. Yeah, so cheers, Patty. I actually noticed that I made a mistake earlier. You might have noticed me stumble a couple of times reading this because I actually put a draft. I put the draft on here, not the edited version. So that was a bit of a mistake, but never mind. David says, great stuff. Thanks, Dave. Whoa, mouse has just gone mad. Hi, Chris. Yeah, I took your advice this time, Chris. Yeah. Was that better? Yeah. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would look. I think is I mean, like I say, Chris, I've done I've done. This is my eighth, and like I said, the first one I did was for you guys with Model Citizen. Um, I would urge you to do it. I would urge other people to give it a go. It's pretty terrifying, especially the first couple of times. Because I mean, I've been on stage like bands and things like that in front of people, not found that as nerve wracking as this. It's the fact that when you can see the person you're reading to, you can gauge how it's going. Whereas on this, you're just going blind. you just, I hope they're not all like sticking their fingers up at me or something. That's a good question, Karen. Karen asks, a warning to the curious. Why do you think curiosity is so often punished in horror stories? Is it a vicarious pleasure for the sensible reader? Uh, maybe, but I think the fact is that I think what it is we all have that instinct, that sort of that instinct of adventure, that kind of you know, we all have curiosity. I mean, and that's what separates us from bricks, isn't it? The fact that we're self-aware and we're curious about the world around us. I mean, that's what separates us from this desk. That sentience is the way it goes. Um, but yeah, I've never really thought about it like that. But yeah, a lot of them are a warning, especially the cosmic horror, the Lovecraftian, and all that kind of stuff. It is all basically, you know, that guy was reading a book he shouldn't read it, and then tentacles came out and ate his face. So yeah, uh, that's interesting. I've never really actually thought about that. Yeah. Patty. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Model Citizen. Yeah. I'd like to actually do that again because I made a bit of a hash of it. Although I actually watched it back, but it came out better than I thought. I think it was just panic. I was absolutely panicking when I did that first one. Um, oh, you have. Patty says they have columns now in each magazine. Excellent. So yeah, right. See, because I know like the one I've got, it's got stories and marketing stuff, and you got some features. Oh yeah, another one for my authory friends. Like they actually do. Well, I mean, they can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but I know they were doing it. I assume they have. But they were letting people buy like ad space in it at very, very, very reasonable rates. So you could, if you've got any if you've got like a book or something you want to, just get in touch with them. I mean, they're really nice people. So, not gonna bite your head off or anything. So you may as well ask. Chris, when will we see a book from you? Well, that's funny. I've actually got 5 novellas out for submission at the minute. One, I've got one that's been picked up by Black Hair Press, and I am looking at it's like later in the year, sort of towards the end of the year, beginning of next year. I'm going to be looking at doing my first um, short story collection. I mean, obviously, I've got to wait for some of the stuff that I want to put in it to come out of contract before I can do that. But it's something on the horizon. I've also pretty much the first thing I wrote when I decided was a full length novel, uh, but it needs a lot of work because it was the first thing I started writing after like something like a 20-year gap. So I'd forgotten how to punctuate. It's a bit of a mess. But I've also written an episodic novel. I've got 2 more pieces to put in that, and then that's ready to go. But yeah, I want to try and get some more of my stuff out there. But everything's going really well. In fact, it's going a lot better than I ever imagined because I own the first thing I was published in was Death and Butterflies from Suicide House, and that was December. So, and I've just under 30 publications now. So I'm quite pleased about that. and I've got I've got about 35 things out there, all waiting for like all out for submission. Uh, I think I've mentioned before, I tend to go for a mudslinging approach for submissions. It's just like you keep throwing enough mud, eventually some of it will stick. You know, somebody will like it. Because I mean, I was asked not quite recently any tips for like people starting out, and I think the biggest tip I can give people is don't get hung up on rejections. It's gonna happen. It is gonna happen. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, because not everybody has the same taste. I mean, I get more rejections than I do acceptances, but I get it. I mean, they're always, I mean, mine are always really nice. They're always like, really liked it, really cool, but it really doesn't work in this. I mean, some of my stuff, I mean, this is one of the more traditional cosmic horror things I do. Some of the things I've written are quite, yeah. Like the last one about the killer oysters. 903. I mean, Chris, not real, Chris Hewitt. He was the one who said about giving it 5 minutes before I started. I mean, he got the ping at 903. So he, even I can't talk that much rubbish for like 10 minutes before I start. Uh, yep, I was right. Correct about the ad space. Yeah, like I say, there they are. They're right down there. If any of you guys out there have got anything, like, just ask them. You've got nothing to lose. They've got nothing to lose, you know? So, yep. And they're still accepting ads, promotions, and selected feature stories in the magazines. Excellent. Yeah. Now, I'll probably be doing another one at some point. uh, this one was a bit of a funny one because I know all, like in the UK, all the pubs opened again last Saturday. So I was just wondering if that how much of a hit that would take on the viewership, but it doesn't really seem to have had that much of an effect. I mean, a lot of people don't watch live; they watch like later. Uh, so yeah, I guess see what happens. Give it a go. Like I said again, just before I shoot off, Guided by the Light comes from the March 2020 edition of Horror Magazine. There it is. From Breaking Rules Publishing. You can find details underneath the video. Remember to like it, share it, especially if you're especially if you're in it. Let's get it out there, man. Yeah. So again, thank you all for tuning in. Some good questions tonight again. Uh, Thank you all. I will see you soon.